Hey guys, we're at the beginning of August 2026, and a lot of people are asking about the Salt Lake City real estate market. Well, here's exactly what's going on. And there's some pretty interesting stuff that we haven't seen in about 13 years. So I think the first thing you always need to check out when you're wondering how is the market is simple economics 101, supply versus demand. And right now, in Salt Lake County, there is exactly 3,621 homes, townhomes, and condos for sale. To put that in perspective, there are currently 1,249 in escrow. So if you divide the number of homes that are active for sale versus the amount of homes that are in escrow, you get about a 3-month supply of housing. But that is not how economists define what is called an absorption rate. They define that by how many properties have actually sold in the last 30 days. And this is where it gets a little bit interesting because just over 1,000 have sold in the last 30 days. In fact, 1,067 homes. So there's actually almost a 4-month supply of active inventory for sale in all of Salt Lake County if you run an absorption rate based on what has sold in the last 30 days. Guess what that means? That means we have officially stepped into a buyer's market. Guess how long it's been since we've, by definition, seen a buyer's market? Well, the last buyer's market we saw was in 2012, the last year of the Great Recession. So it's really been over 13 years since we've seen a true, by definition, buyer's market. So what does that mean for buyers? Well, we've been saying this for about 6 months here in Utah Cribs because we have seen inventory growing, and I've been telling people we're going to step into a buyer's market. So over the last couple of years, as the market's been a little slower, we've seen things like buyer concessions or a little bit of negotiation room on price, a little more inventory, but that's continued to grow. And now that we've actually stepped into a buyer's market, we are seeing negotiation room on price, concessions, that's repairs or credits being offered for things that are found during escrow, and other negotiated items being given to buyers. Now, here's the golden question that everybody wants to know. How much? Well, it really depends on your area and your price bracket. For example, median price is around $650,000 in Salt Lake, and under $650,000, there's not as much negotiation room. Over $650,000, there's a little more. Over $1.5 million, there's a little more. The way I like to answer this, and you know our slogan here at Utah Cribs, we educate you with the facts so you can make an educated decision when it comes to your real estate. And so what we like to see here is look at the actual absorption rate. And I think the best way to look at that is here, what I call the monthly snapshot report. Now, this report will dive in and show us some of the key factors that we want to understand about the Salt Lake real estate market. For example, in July of 26, 1,155 total homes sold for a median price of $545,000 and a list to sell price ratio of 96%. That's the number we're talking about. So to put it in layman's terms, 1,155 people bought a property in July, and on average, the sellers got 96% of their asking price. So how much negotiation room is there on houses? Well, this data point doesn't lie. There's 4%. That's 4% based off of the final list price that the seller had. So what we're typically seeing these days is sellers kind of overpricing because they still think the market's hot and everybody wants to try. Then they lower price 2 or 3 times. Then a buyer offers like 10% off, and they go back and forth and then finally settle around 96% of the final asking price. Now, that's not always the case. We have had some people get about 10% off of asking price, and we've still had people pay full price or more if a property is priced right. The other thing that has started ticking up is days on market. It's not horrendous. It's still only 36 days on average if you price your property correctly. Now, here is the biggest factor that I think everybody needs to understand. And this is something that we have not seen in 14 years, okay? If you look at any given month and you compare it to the same month of the prior year, you're always gonna see price appreciation. For example, last May in 25, median price was 555, and then in May of this year, it was 570. So you could say median price went up $15,000 or 3% if you compare May to May. If you compare June to June, it was 545 and then went to 561, so another 3%. In other words, the market was up about 3% from where it was at last year. However, July of 25, 549. July of 26, 545. That's a 1%, a tiny bit less than a 1% decline. Now, in the grand scheme of things, is 1% that big of a deal? No, absolutely not. Does it signal that the sky is falling? No, it does not. However, we have not seen a month over month in any given time frame over the last 14 years, we have not seen a median price decline. Now, if the whole year posts a median price decline, in other words, whatever the end of 25's median price was, and we get in December of 26 and it's less, which is a possibility since we just saw this in July, then we'll have something that we've only seen 7 times in the last 100 years, and that is a median price decline for the entire year. That has only happened in Salt Lake City 7 times in 100 years. The last time this happened was 4 years of the Great Recession, 2008 to 2012. We saw median price decline year over year over year. And that total decline in that 4-year period was 34%. Now, I'm not saying that we're entering the Great Recession. There are totally different factors here. And in the Great Recession, certain price points got over a 2-year supply, and we have just under a 4-month supply. However, I am saying we could see an 8th year in a 100-year median price decline in 26. And I think it's highly likely we continue to see inventory grow as we go into the fall winter. So let's sum this up. What does it mean for you buyers? For you buyers, there are more listings, more opportunities. However, price is not falling like crazy. So you're going to make your best decision between now and probably February of 27 to just pick out what you want to buy, negotiate the best deal you can, and buy it. Waiting is not really going to benefit you a significant amount of money. Waiting for the market to crash is not extremely unlikely to happen. For you sellers, what does this mean? I'll say this very blunt. Sometimes we get some heat for this. For you sellers, if your market has been on the home, if your home has been on the market for 2 weekends and it hasn't got an offer, you're overpriced. It's not going to sell. And for the first time in 14 years, median price is declining on you and inventory is growing. So if it didn't go, it's not going to go the next weekend, and the right buyer is not going to come along. They're just simply not. That's what the data says. What the data says is you got 2 options. You improve the property so it will sell for the price you're asking, or you lower the price until the market accepts the price that you're asking. I know that sounds harsh. I know it's a little tough to hear, but that is a fact. And with our sellers that really do need to sell, we let them know this information, even though it's hard to hear, because it's a big deal to people, especially if they need to sell, to know what's going on. And they may be a little frustrated at pricing right now, but if we tell them up front and the market continues to go down a little bit, 1, 2, 3%, it doesn't sound like a lot, but that can be $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 on your property. And you get more and more desperate as we get into September, October, November, and then pricing's worse. And then you go, oh my gosh, I wish I would have just taken the offer that came along that I thought was too low. So we're very blunt with our clients. And we just had some townhomes we let go because the pricing was not coming down fast enough. And we were giving this type of market data. And with most of our sellers, the best approach is to price the property fair, and then after a couple weekends, lower it 1% every Monday till it goes. Now, there's other things we do in marketing and stuff like that, but really that's the best approach for sellers who need to sell, who want to sell this year. If you're not one of those sellers and you don't have to sell, then you probably just take your home off the market because it's not going to go if it's been on for a while and the price is staying firm. And so it just kind of gives you this false hope. Again, I know that sounds harsh, but you should probably just take it off the market if you don't need to sell and wait to see what next March or April brings. Typically, even if it's a soft market, we see seasonality in a market. So in March to April of 27, we will likely see the market go up 3 to 8%. If it's a really hot spring, could be 7, 8%. If it's slow, it'll still go up 3 or 4% median price from March to July. And so you just take it off and look to sell next spring, summer if you don't have to sell between this fall, winter. That's the best candid advice we can give you. And that's our slogan here at Utah Cribs. We educate you so you can make an educated decision when it comes to your real estate.